Good morning. Kevin Davis coming to you with another midweek motivation. I trust that your week's off to a great start. I hope that you are looking forward to a great holiday weekend as we enter into this Thanksgiving season. As we come to you today with this midweek motivational message, today my thoughts is having an attitude of gratitude. It is an attitude of gratitude that equals happiness. So in my morning readings, I was reading when Apostle Paul began to say he learned the secret of contentment. He began to write and he began to say some things. He says, I have learned in whatever situation I'm in to be content. He says, I know how to be brought low as well as how to abound. He said, in any and every circumstance, he says, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and facing hunger. The secret of knowing about abundance and knowing it need. He summed it up when he said, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So what I take from this is what we focus on is magnified. I've heard it said that anything we focus on will expand, it will grow, and it will intensify. No wonder Paul said this. When Paul began to write one time, he said, and now, dear brothers, he said, and sisters, he says, one final thing. He says, fix your thoughts on things that are true, what are honorable, that are right, that are pure, that are lovely, that are admirable. He says, think about things that are excellent, things that are worthy of praise. So as he began to give this instruction, he was saying what we focus on does matter. What we focus on is what we are going to see. In the past, maybe even here in the more recent future or more recently, you have experienced what my dad called car fever. Car fever, as my dad would describe it, is wanting a car that I didn't really need, that exceeded what would meet my requirements, and in most cases, something that I really couldn't afford. But it starts with you not even thinking about a new car. Then all of a sudden, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a neighbor, they start talking about a new car. All of a sudden, as they begin to talk about that car, then you start thinking about cars, you start seeing them. When they get that new car, all of a sudden it gets your attention thinking about a car. When that happens, you start paying more attention to cars around you. You even start researching cars. Sometimes the next thing you know, you see it, then the justification process begins. You begin to tell yourself, well, why you really need it, why you have to have it. So then you're now going to the step of going to actually start looking at cars. When you start looking at one, there it is, the perfect one. You've seen the prettiest color you've ever seen. It's different than any other. The next thing you know, you're sitting in a room, signing papers, taking home a brand new car. And I thought about this. This process perfectly illustrates to me what you focus on gets magnified. As you begin to focus on a vehicle, it magnified to the point of, I don't need one. It would be nice to have. I really would like to have. Oh, I really need it. To the next thing, you're driving another car. The scenario about a vehicle is actually, in reality, very similar to many things that happen in life. You know what? I found that the older I get, the wiser my father was. I think back about the many things that he taught me. But isn't it amazing that when you see a vehicle, you see a color, a style, different options, maybe one you've never seen, but the very moment that you get that car, when you start looking around, you see them everywhere. You see the very same one. You see ones just like it. But it's because what you focus on gets magnified. When we think about this, so how does this apply to life? This is what I would call selective perception. What we focus on is magnified. What we focus on is what we see. The same principle works for gratitude. Developing an attitude of gratitude produces happiness. When we think about that, several months ago, I was working with a coaching client. It was around our second, maybe third session. And I noticed a trend. I began to see a focus on the negative. I began to hear so many things that were going wrong. I began to hear the things about the people who just weren't getting things done correctly. So during that session, I challenged my client to start doing something. I asked him if he would, the next morning, the first thing when he wakes up, if he would just take just a few moments to write down 3 things that they were thankful for. Just 3 things that they were thankful for, and continue doing that each morning until our next session. And I said, also throughout the day, I would like to ask you to observe and find people that are doing things correctly. Now, whether you give them a verbal compliment at that time or you just take notice of it, if you're not comfortable giving the verbal compliment, just take notice of it. But that evening before you go to bed, I would like for you to write down a couple compliments of a few people that you have caught doing things right. Of course, as we talked about this, the client said, you know what, I'll make a commitment to do that this week. I don't know that they were totally sold on this and they thought that it would work, but when I thought about this, the next call we have our next session. Immediately I say, it was an amazing session, because when I asked, how was your week? The response was enthusiastically, it was great. I had an awesome week. So how'd the challenge go? Did you complete the task I'd asked you to do? The response was, I sure did, Kevin. It's amazing how much people changed in this past week. Isn't that amazing how much people had changed? I had no choice but to remind that client, it was not the people that changed. It was them that made the change. Once again, selective perception. What you are looking for or what you are focusing on is what you're going to see the most of. If you look for the positive, you're going to see the positive and you're going to see more of it. If you look for the negative, you're going to see plenty of negative. We're bombarded with negativity on every side. We can't turn on the television. We can't turn on the news. We can't read the newspaper without hearing negativity. It is everywhere. But just being totally transparent, just because you start looking for and seeing more positive, it does not mean that the negative things disappear. It does not mean that others will not do wrong things. It does not make things go away. Those things will still happen regardless of whether you're focusing on the positive or focusing on the negative. But when you focus on the positive and with an attitude of gratitude, you will approach and you will respond to these things in a different manner. My friend Bob Bodine, he says in his book, 2 Chairs, a wonderful book. If you've not read that book, you need to check it out. He says, when your focus changes, so does your attitude. Zig tells a great story. He tells a story about this young executive and his son and a newspaper. There was a young business executive, and he had took home some work to prepare for a meeting the next day. And as he took home that work, he had a 5-year-old son. That 5-year-old son was continually trying to get his attention. Dad, come on, let's play, let's do this. Son, give me just a few minutes. I've got to get this work done right now. Just give me a few minutes. The interruption continued to go on as he was trying to get this. He looked over on his desk and he seen a newspaper that had a picture of the world on it. So he looked at that and he thought, okay, he took that newspaper with a picture of the world and he tore that into several pieces. And as he tore that into pieces, he gave that to his young son. And he said, son, go put this back together, much like a puzzle would be. Put this back together, and when you get finished, he says, then I'll be ready to have some time and we'll go play. He thought, this will buy me some time. Within 3 minutes, the son comes back and he lays it down on his desk and he has it completed. The dad looks at him and he says, son, how did you do that so quickly? The son looked up at him and said, it was easy, Dad. He said, on the other side was a man. When I got the man right, the world was right. What words of wisdom that is. When we get ourselves right, all of a sudden the things around us begin to look different. Because it is selective perception. The very moment that we begin getting ourselves right doesn't change the things that are going on around us, but it does change how we see them, and it does change how we respond to them. Once again, as we go into this Thanksgiving holiday season, I think it's a great reminder to us that to be thankful and to be grateful. What are you thankful for right now? What are you thankful for? Maybe you want to chime in and say some things you're thankful for as we enter into this session. But I want to challenge you, the same challenge, to change and have that attitude of gratitude and see if the things around you don't change. Because it is amazing how that happens. When we put forth the right effort, when we have the right attitude, and we surround ourselves with the right people, these are three key ingredients to developing an attitude of gratitude. So, as we begin to wrap up this session, may I remind you, happiness does not come at all. Happiness is being grateful for all you have. So as we enter into this season, but not only as we enter into this season, each and every day, don't take life for granted. Life is short. It swiftly passes by. It seems like it goes faster as we get older. Don't take it for granted. Each day, wake up. What are you thankful for? Each day, find people that are doing things right. Compliment them, encourage them. Write down that. Have you a gratitude journal, as you've heard many people talk about. I trust this week that you've been inspired. I trust you've been equipped. And most of all, I trust that you have been motivated through this midweek motivation to have an attitude of gratitude. May you make the remainder of your week a great week. May you have a blessed and a great Thanksgiving holiday. May God bless you until we come to you again next week with a midweek motivation.